having a massive case of shiny object syndrome. As a lot of makers do, staying focused on what I'm working on can sometimes be a real challenge. So as a hobbyist and a model maker, my workbench is sort of the center of my universe, and keeping it organized is critical to maintaining focus, or that elusive flow state as modern psychology calls it. And since I've always fancied myself a bit of a designer as well as a maker, I set out to create the things to enhance my ability to focus and hopefully my creativity. Also, as I'm fond of saying, buying it, where's the fun in that? So I want to share with you some of the problems I've identified, the 3D printed devices I created to solve those problems, and I'm willing to bet some, if not most of you, have had one or more of these same issues. So now, the files for all these prints will be available on Thingiverse, and the links will be in the description, but stick around because there is a bit of madness to the method that will help you in getting a functionally successful print. So with that, first up, if you're familiar with the channel, you may have seen this one before. This benchtop tool stand is the thing that kicked off this whole process and sent me down the path of learning CAD and 3D printing. One thing's for sure, this one took the longest to go from idea through to having a finished thing, and I had played around with some CAD software in the past, but the more popular ones out there had features I wanted, but they were behind a paywall. So I landed on FreeCAD, which I have found very capable for both 3D printing and CNC. Before this, I was keeping most of my small hand tools in these drawers, and if I wanted something, I typically had to pull everything out to find it, and this is where the tool stand idea came from. The first one I designed was just a single layer, and it worked okay, but I found getting items from the back a little frustrating. So the second one I designed with 2-layer heights. The shorter area in the front is for the smaller, like tweezers and hobby knives and toothpicks and such, while the larger spots in the back are for my rotary tool, pliers, screwdrivers, sanding sticks, and so forth. And I've got to just say, having everything out where you can just see it and grab it is awesome. There are multiple orientations it can be printed in depending on which way you turn the plates. So, and also you can print the front section just by itself, or the back section, or both together as I have it here. For these, I use just standard default settings, and at the time of this video, I'm using Cura 5.2 as the slicer. Next, we have airbrush stands. Having your airbrush set up and ready to go without having to get stuff out is the way to go. This gives you more options. You'll discover new uses over time, and I like to be able to just flip the compressor on and go, and this is especially handy not just for paint but also for weathering. I have found weathering to be such an enjoyable and organic process that having as many tools and options available as possible can be very helpful, and I feel like I'm getting a better result. So the stands came with a bit of ideation. I had originally downloaded an STL file for a version I liked, but it turned out that although aesthetically pleasing, it was pretty flimsy, and even though I had printed it with some more robust settings, I kept breaking it off. So I think I'd glued this thing back together 2 or 3 times. So I set out to design one that could withstand me banging around while keeping the general shape and usability of this original one. Also, I intentionally pushed the print settings for these so that they're denser with extra walls, and the individual layers are tighter, so it should hopefully not break off as easily. Also, as you can see, it's a little rough around the corners due to how I printed it, and I'm certain someone with more experience could fix this, so let me know in the comments what I'm doing wrong here. These are paint trays. Having an airbrush handy is pretty useless unless you've got some paint to go with it. As my collection of paint is growing steadily, being able to have everything out where I can see it is becoming a bit more challenging, and I'd stumbled across this wooden tray that was perfect for the Vallejo dropper bottles, but now I have more paints than I have spots on the tray, so I knocked up a couple of different versions in CAD and printed them out. Of all these designs, this was probably the most simple one, and I knocked it out in FreeCAD in about 10 minutes. And there are 3 different trays. There's a 12-spot one, there's one for 18, and another one for the 2-ounce craft paint bottles that has 8 spots on it. I'm finding these things very helpful, especially during a build, so that I have the paints I've chosen for that build out in one place and they're not scattered across my bench waiting just to be knocked over. This simple print, nothing but just standard settings with a 20% infill. This is, I'm calling a little spray hood or spray booth. So you have your airbrush and your paint sorted out. You need to have a little paint booth. My problem here is twofold. First, safety, and second, ease of use. And both are essential, but don't need to be mutually exclusive. Previously, I designed a simple spray booth out of a cardboard box, a fan, and a furnace filter. And this thing works great. I'm able to vent it out the window if needed, but it's enormous and a pain to set up in my small space when all you want to use it for is a 30-second squirt of paint on a spot on a model. It hardly seems worth the effort. So I found myself just throwing down a piece of paper and just not messing with it. With safety and minimizing overspray in mind, I started looking for a solution, but couldn't find any small footprint spray booths that was quick to set up and quick to take down without having to clear my whole bench, so I set out to design my own. This first one I scratch built out of some 1/4 inch material, Centra, and a couple of old case fans, and it's turned into a very successful, I'm going to call it a prototype, that I'm still using, but at that time I already had this video in mind, so I wanted to design some 3D printed versions so you guys had some options. And if you want to scratch build your own, I'll put a link up here that shows how I built mine. For the 3D printed ones, I've made two versions. There's a single and a double. The double is going to be great for paint or dust, and the single can be fitted with a charcoal filter and used as a fume extractor for soldering. Also, if you do this, make sure you're getting a proper charcoal filter. I found these high CFM case fans. It's 150 CFM per fan to be the best, and if you don't have any old PCs laying around, you can dismantle. I got some extra ones off of eBay, but they're also all over Amazon. You can find these things. Again, for the printing, I used high quality settings, and to maximize the layer adhesion, I beefed up the number of walls, and there's virtually no infill, almost entirely wall for this thing, but I did set the infill up to 40% in case it was a little thick in a place I missed a spot. The two pieces go together with super glue, and I recommend starting from the center back spine and working your way out in both directions. And speaking of glue, I discovered early in life I'm a klutz, and put a bottle of something in front of me and I'm going to knock it over. So again, I went looking for a solution online, and I found this little triangle thing, and it's okay, but I wanted something to look better and be a little more substantial and have some more functionality. I also made a version for you Tamiya fans, and I put these little buttonholes on the bottom so you can add some weight or magnets if so desired. Don't go out of your way on printing these, just standard settings, and I think I used 20% infill for these. These guys are sprue stands. Now, I am a huge fan of Bandai, and there are no glue kits they make, and these things are engineering masterpieces, but they can also be very complicated to assemble and have to go together in a very specific order of operation, and just cutting all the pieces off ahead of time to organize them is not an option, at least not for me anyway. I need to work off the sprues as I go, but space is a premium, and just spreading them out in front of me is not an option. So these actually were printed almost in draft quality, and they don't have to hold much, so there's no reason to really beef them up, and it leaves this cool texture pattern across the top. So there you have it. Thanks so much for joining me, and if you like what you found here, please like and subscribe. And I've already got a few other ideas in mind for improvements, and I'm sure I'll have enough of them for another video in the future. And in the meantime, the next video is right here. I don't know what it is, but YouTube thinks you'll like it. Thanks again, and go make something.